Great. Okay, so yeah, let's start with that intention setting part. I want to just use a maraca from Boriken that one of the abuelas from the tribe that I'm in has made. And this is actually from one of our sacred trees in Boriken. Boriken is Puerto Rico, but the indigenous name of it. So they dry the outside of the fruit and then they carve different symbols in it, and yeah, it's a really beautiful process to make. I haven't yet made my own, but I will one day. So yeah, we'll use this, and then I have sacred bark from here that has a beautiful aroma that we'll just also use. And then yeah, I just want to like say my intentions for this call. I'm really excited to talk to you today, and if you want to say something or do anything, like totally open for that too.
Wait, I don't have a question about the maraca. Is it
Uh-huh.
seeds that's giving it the sound, or is there something else in there?
Yes, there's seeds in here. I'm not sure which ones she used. Yeah, you can use so many different types of seeds. So I know you like aromas too. I wanted to share, but this is my favorite one. Too
We
bad
need
it's
to
like
create.
virtual, so
I know they need to go ahead and create that. All these other things they can wait. We need smell of vision.
I was recently in Chiloé, which is an island like the south of Chile, and one of the medicine women, she taught me how to like the way that they smoke and like or utilize smudging for, you know, clearing spaces, putting in positive energy and things like that. And she said that you always want to go to the right and like do circles going towards the right. So
Okay.
yeah, that's what and now I'm like, I like that. I like making it intentional the way that you move with the smoke.
I'm gonna light some Palo Santo so I can keep the effect.
I just love it. So yes, I'm very, very grateful to be here. I want to share my intention with you, which is to have a beautiful, natural conversation with you that's guided by our ancestors, and that this conversation reaches the people that it should be reaching, and that everything that we say comes directly from our heart and is guided from the divine self. Anhankatu.
What did you just say? The
Yes,
final thing you said to close your prayer?
Hankatu is a word that comes from our indigenous community here, which is now known as Taino, but I'm pretty sure it's not what it was called when they were here on the land. I'm pretty sure it came from the people, like the Spaniards who colonized this area, giving the name to the community, but we'll just refer to them as the Taino community because unfortunately we don't have a lot of info on what the actual names would be, or even like our vocabulary is a big debate because a lot of this has been lost through colonization, and there's people trying to revive it, but they're utilizing the basis of language from different tribes in South America or Central America. And some people are saying, oh, it's from South America, and some others are like, hey, it's from Central America. So you'll see a mix, but there are some words that we do know, and one of them is anhankatu. And anhankatu is a phrase that almost means like amen. It's like as it is, like it's like affirming something.
Yeah, it's like a seal, like Ashtray, amen.
Yes, it's just like ashe.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I deeply resonate with the intentions that you just shared, and honestly, I'm reflecting them as well. I'm affirming that this conversation is a seed that can grow into many beautiful things and can nourish our unique missions, but also our shared vision for how knowledge can be translated through stories, and how through amplifying these stories we're able to create deeper relationships to each other, to ourselves, to the planet, and just to this experience of life that we get to share.
Awesome.
I feel so blessed to have you as just the first guest on this podcast. This has been something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I just feel like you're just amazing. You're an amazing catalyst for this, and I really, really do affirm that this reaches the right people, like you said, and that it also positions us as just advocates for this work, and that positions our work in the hands of those that are ready to receive it.
Yeah, I got
Ashe. Are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Great. Welcome to Rooted Relations, a space where we will explore the intertwined stories of plants, people, and the planet. I am your host, Demi Lizanne, a botanical scientist, aromatic ethnographer, and the founder of Traces of Akoya. This series is born from a deep desire to reconnect with the land, with lineage, and with living traditions that shape how we relate to botanicals today. Through honest conversations with farmers, formulators, healers, and stewards of traditional knowledge, Rooted Relations aims to bring transparency to the botanical supply chain while amplifying the voices that have long been its foundation. In each episode, we will dig into the cultural, environmental, and economic dimensions of herbalism, asking not what we use, but where it came from, who tends to it, and what stories live within it. Today, for our very first episode, I am honored to welcome Daniella, the heart of Petra Aroma, a botanical self-care company rooted in her ancestral homeland, Boriken, also known as Puerto Rico. Daniella is a doctor of pharmacy, an aromatherapy practitioner, educator, and a steward of Indigenous matriarchal healing traditions. Together, we will explore the truth behind the origins of medicine and how much of what's now labeled as Western medicine is in fact inherited, borrowed, and often uncredited knowledge from Indigenous cultures. This is a conversation about lineage, appropriation, and the responsibility that we all share in remembering who holds the root. Daniella, how are you feeling today?
I'm excited. I even like the first time we talked on the phone quickly, like we started getting into deep things and it was like, oh, this is perfect. This feels right. And I'm really excited to just keep going with that conversation, and I love what you're doing, and yeah, let's talk.
Yeah, definitely was really inspired by that conversation. It was very affirming for me as well. I know that this episode in particular is very important because it's really like an entry point to what a lot of people think healing is. And I think that honestly we're both very uniquely positioned to speak on this topic, being that we chose to go down traditional paths of knowledge, but always knew that there was more that really wasn't being shared in those classrooms. So I'm glad that we are just honestly stepping into it and advocating for something that really needs a lot more attention. Yeah. The main theme of this conversation is obviously to center Indigenous knowledge as the foundation of well-being, but also to challenge the idea of Western medicine as an authority, while also acknowledging the fact that they can both exist together. So let's begin by discussing a little bit more about your journey, just like where you're from, how you've arrived in this space, and yeah, just anything that you feel will set the tone as far as like who you are and your character.
So I am Daniella Isabel Olan Torres, and my family is from Boriken, which is the ancestral land of the Taino people, now known as Puerto Rico. I was born and raised as a diaspora, though, so I'm in New Jersey my whole life. I loved being there. It was great. Like there's so much culture especially in New Jersey. I can't really speak to other places because I never really lived anywhere else long term except for New Jersey, but I met so many different types of people and from different backgrounds, and the food is really great there. But growing up, I always had this like, I don't know, I've always missed not being where my family's from. And every time my mom or my parents would take me to Puerto Rico or send me with my grandma for the summer, which was a lot, I felt like my heart was whole. I loved being in the mountains where my family's from. I always felt like I was like super Puerto Rican, even though I lived in the suburbs where there weren't a lot of people that were Latino or Latinx. So I had a lot of identity crisis growing up with that. And people didn't really understand my background and the way that we do things. So growing up was tough in the suburbs, but once I was able to go into college and really find myself, I felt like life got a lot better at that point. And yeah, I was always really interested in science, which is why I saw myself going into pharmacy. And I always thought it was interesting to know like how things affect our bodies. And I still to this day think it's like amazing how something that we ingest can like make this reaction into our body to do something, whether it's positive or negative. I wanted to be aware of what that is in a very deep way, and I chose pharmacy because I loved organic chemistry. I loved like looking at the molecules and then seeing what you can add to them and making a reaction, seeing what that makes. I loved that. So I went into it. Yeah. Oh yeah, because you also did cosmetic chemistry work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And I also think I'm really proud of that. I don't regret going into pharmacy, even though now I'm into natural medicine. I'm learning like the ancestral way of healing because there's so much, it's really fascinating to learn things in like a very detailed way, and then also like utilizing that basis to then mesh it with like, you know, the ancestral ways that didn't necessarily look into like those chemical compounds, but knowing both I think is super powerful, especially in today's day and age where people only trust, or the majority of people only trust like the conventional setting of medicine.
Yeah, it's like two different trains of thought for sure, but I agree with you. It's like the foundational thinking is really useful, I think, in life, like from a scientific perspective, going from like molecule to, or just like from chemical to molecule, like, and then just building up and how that becomes an actual medicine or an actual physical thing is very interesting. But I feel like that's kind of the parallel between, I guess, I want to say westernized science and indigenous science. It always does start with the source.
Yes, it's very true. But it's looked at in a different way. It's like in indigenous science, it's like the source is the seed or the spirit of the plant, and then like conventional modern science, the source are like carbons and hydrogens. So it's like, yeah, it's totally different. Yeah, so I went into pharmacy school, I completed that. I did so many different things in pharmacy, worked in like hospital setting, retail settings, even pharmaceuticals. And I did consulting, and in all of that, I just didn't find my tribe in those settings. I did learn a lot. I'm not gonna lie about that. I definitely learned a lot, but it wasn't my tribe, and my spirit didn't feel right doing that day to day. And at the same time, I had this like, I was going to Puerto Rico so often at one point about 3 years ago, more than 4 times a year. And I was like, I really want to be here. So I had the great opportunity of getting my own place in Boriken. This was around the time there was a major hurricane. Because of that, I really wanted to be here even more, to be with the land and steward it and help it rebuild it. So I saw myself accelerating the process of moving there. And when I first started, I thought I was just gonna be there for like 6 months or even less, and then mostly in New Jersey. I was holding on to Jersey so much.
Yeah.
But then, more and more as I was here, I was like, no, my spirit feels so full here. I'm staying. I don't care if it's more inconvenient, and there's a lot of like political things that make it hard, and even just accessibility to stable electricity and water is sad, but that is something that happens here. But I didn't care. Out of all of that, I was like, this is it. This is where my spirit wants to be. And I'm so grateful for being here because it should. Yes. And that's how I knew, because my spirit was telling me so much here versus Puerto Rico. And that's how I was drawn into plant medicine. When I was here exploring the lands, like I had this calling. The plants were telling me and like exposing me that like medicine comes from plants. Plants have these compounds in them. Yes.
Wow.
And then I met so many cool mentors that I still appreciate so much, and they're still mentors to me that have taught me about the Caribbean medicine. And Caribbean is so like vast and diverse with the medicine that it has. Also Africa, and like South America. A lot of places in the South, in the Central, in the Americas, in the Caribbean, and Africa have like such diverse medicine.
It's the equator. It's like everything close to that equatorial line is
That's
is
true.
where life thrives and like biodiversity thrives. So it's like it makes sense that, in those times when all of these great discoveries were coming, the places they were going were across the equator. It was across the world, but it was all across the equator.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Europe. I can't say Europe. I don't know. I don't know much about the European plants, but like from what you're saying, it seems like there was definitely a need for them to explore, because maybe I know there was a lot of sickness there. Maybe they didn't know how to heal people, and they were like, okay, there must be something out there that we're missing. Like, what are we missing? And
I think a lot of the plants that are cultivated in westernized countries are basically cultivated there now from where their original origins were. But that kind of brings us into our first question about origins, and it's like, what is the biggest misconception about the invention of medicine and where it comes from? What would you say?
I think that especially in school, they don't teach where the original medicine comes from. It's like it starts off with the carbons and hydrogens, like we were talking about. But no one talks about how before colonization happened, like the plants is what were first discovered. They extracted the different compounds in there. They learned what they looked like, and carbons and hydrogen and oxygen and all those different elements. And then from there, they were able to make it into like a synthetic form. But no one talks about that these come from plants. So I think that's what's missing. And I think education-wise, they're missing that part that's so important. Basis of what's taught. At least talk about it for like one class. Like, I don't know if you talked about that, if they talked about that in cosmetology, like in your scientific classes.
There was one class that I took, it's called Chemistry in the Brain, and it talked a lot about just drug impacts, and a lot of it did start with like plants. Let's talk about like cocaine came from just but yeah, I was just talking about like a lot of different botanicals and like where these synthesized drugs would come from, and I really appreciated that. That class kind of like bothered me at the end though, because we had this final and it was essentially like, a interaction that happens in the brain, and I chose essential oils, and she gave me a terrible grade for that. She's like, this doesn't count as the interaction. I'm like, it's literally the same thing we've been talking about all semester. I just chose essential oils. But yeah, it was so interesting how like, because I chose a holistic modality that isn't as significantly impacting on chemistry, that it wasn't considered valid. So I totally agree that is definitely one of the biggest misconceptions. I think another misconception is like how a lot of people think that the invention of medicine started in a lab setting, or like started by the hands of people like aristocratic philosophers, but really it was them going into these places, different ethnobotanists coming from all over just Eastern Europe and finding places that had all of these healing modalities and bringing them back, and then further breaking them down to create what we consider pharmaceutical medicine.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
The question is, can you share an example of plant knowledge that has existed long before it was discovered in the lab, something maybe from Borican?
Yeah, I can there's one plant or tree called guayacan. It's a beautiful tree. It grows very slowly. You can find it in Colombia too, in South America. It is actually the basis of one very popular pharmaceutical over-the-counter medicine. So the one tree that is a great example of this is called guayacan. It's found in Borican, but also in South America. And this is a tree that grows very slowly. It's actually the basis of what helped make Mucinex, which is an expectorant. So there's this chemical compound called guayacol, which is in the resin of guayacan, the tree. And that compound, guayacol, was extracted and realized that it was really good in terms of helping people with coughs, and utilizing it as an expectorant to remove mucus from the chest area. And yeah, so that basis was then like modified in a certain way to make the expectorant called guaifenicin. So you can even see like in the name of it, it has it. The root comes from that tree.
And let's talk a little bit about why that is, like why they go from the actual plant compound to a synthesized version of it.
Okay, so there's two main reasons I would want to mention. One is that it is easier to make a stable dose with a synthesized form, because if you only use the plant, depending on how the plant is grown, if there's a lot of sun or water, they could have different levels of potency of that specific compound, so you can never really get that consistency. So that's one reason. Another reason is intellectual property, where right now there's no way to like IP a plant because it's natural. And what people do is instead they'll extract a compound from a plant, then they'll manipulate it in a certain way using chemical reactions to maybe enhance it a little bit so that it works faster or it targets something or it's less irritating, XYZ. They put it through these $1 million, clinical trials and then get it approved by the FDA, and now they have an intellectual property for this specific chemical compound. I would say those are like the two major
intellectual
ways,
property, or with that synthesizing and it going through the clinical trials and becoming something that it was never meant to be isolated. I mean, I can't say meant to be just because everything happens that's meant to be, but when it is isolated, it's no longer in the synergistic packaging, so that all those other compounds were actually doing functions. They were actually probably regulating blood pressure or making sure that certain receptors were either accessible or inaccessible, and that's where all of these side effects come from when it comes to pharmaceuticals. It's like it wasn't designed originally to be used in that concentration, maybe at that level, even though it is clinically been approved.
Yes, I think that's definitely a debate. What we're talking about now, it's like which one is better, pharmaceutical or holistic medicine. And I think there's pros and cons to both. Like the pros of a pharmaceutical is that yes, you can actually have more precise targeting for an illness, really good for very rare diseases, and the more really hard and tough things, ailments that people have day to day that haven't really found a way to heal from it, from many different ways of healing. So I think that's one pro. And then another pro is mass production of global, mass production, which allows for accessibility in a sense. So they could say, hey, another example, like quinine, for example, is a tree that then turned into a pharmaceutical drug to treat malaria. Quinine is found in South America, maybe areas that are very high, that have a lot of high rates of malaria, haven't had a way to treat it, but they've formed it into a pharmaceutical now that can reach a place like India or, across the world. So those are the pros to it, but like you said, which is so important, there's so many cons to extracting a compound and leaving the holistic side of the plant, which also neglects the spiritual and the cultural context.
So important, I think, like you said, this is the perspective I think that a lot of people take when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Is like, why not use it? Science has afforded us to be able to be healthier faster or to heal faster, but we never ask why did we get sick in the first place? Why is this necessarily something that I'm experiencing, or where is it coming from? And sometimes why it's impossible to find a why. Sometimes things just happen and they're a part of our journey and our process, but it's like that holding space for the emotions or just the process that has happened in order for us to get to certain places, like the choices that we've made lifestyle wise. Those are the things that we really need to consider as we go on these healing journeys. It's not a band-aid situation. It's not a pill that we can take. You still will return to another form of dis-ease in somewhere within your process if that root is not tended to. And I think that's really like what it comes down to. But it's so important to be able to foster or create more equity with medicine, like you were saying earlier. And it also is good for the planet in a lot of ways as well, because the different compounds or the different botanicals that we're discussing, they're not as accessible sustainability wise. There wouldn't be able to help as many people as quickly because you would want to safeguard them and safeguard the environments that they come from.
Yes, and I really like what you're saying about, like, you need to know what the source is, and a lot of people don't know that, and I think a lot of that is today's society. There's this dependence on the healthcare system. So a lot of people see doctors and people who have these degrees as like they know it and I need to follow whatever they say. So if there's any type of disbalance in the body, instead of learning ourselves what happens in our body that makes us feel different, or like knowing what our homeostasis feels like, so that when we're off, we're like, okay, why do I feel off today? And let me feel my body. What is my body asking me for? It could be as simple as water. It could be as simple as like maybe eating something that has more nutrients in it that you need, like iron or magnesium. But because we aren't shown how to do this ourselves, people are like, oh, I feel off. First thing, let me make a doctor's appointment. What happens? They don't know much about you. It's a 15-minute office meeting, and they are pressured to give some sort of pharmaceutical, because if not, the patient's like, oh, why didn't you give me anything? I spent like 2 hours, I took off work to talk to you, and yeah, so then they give something like an antibiotic, which can cause resistance if you don't need it, and then that messes up the healthcare system. The person now has killed their microbiome in their gut. Like their gut health is now wiped out because they're taking antibiotics, and now they have another imbalance, and now they need something to help with their imbalance of that. Maybe they have GERD now or another.
It's just like all these different pills start coming. They just start coming, and you're trying to like get back to feeling whole, but it's like there's so many pieces that feel like, you know, depleted in you, and that you're trying to like piece together, and really it's just like you need to just stop all of them, because it's revisiting the reason why you feel this way. Like we kind of been discussing, it's like there's almost always a root cause, and it's always pretty much associated with lifestyle changes, diet, movement, and mentality.
Yeah, and self-care in terms of like mentality, I think is so important, because if we don't understand ourselves, like how do we know if we're sick, or how do we know like we need plant medicine, or we need some sort of nourishment? Because food is medicine too, 100%. That's the reason why we eat, to be able to live. So that's the most important important healing modality that we have is food. So like learning ourselves is so important.
I think it really just comes down to like simplifying for me and my approach to healing. Like I just would prefer to do less, and to have things that feel like integrated into my life. So that's why I choose this path. I choose the path of, you know, plant medicines, because it feels, what's the word? I'm thinking like invasive, but it's not invasive. What's that word? Like when something is like aggressive, non-aggressive. It feels non-aggressive. It feels like it brings me closer to like the source of things, and it feels like honoring my body.
All of that, all those words are like beautifully explaining that. And that's what I think like when you think about the difference between what's or I would like to say what is missing in modern healthcare, I think it could be kind of put into 3 different things. 1 is spirituality, 2 is connection, and 3 is community. And those are like, that's like the basis of indigenous medicine. And yeah, it's really sad that in modern healthcare, none of those things are really prioritized. I actually have a cool story. I did a internship one time, and we wanted to change the way of like normal healthcare. Instead of a 15-minute session with someone who has who suffers from like diabetes. We came up with this concept of like group visits. So instead of like, you know, a one-on-one with someone, you have a group of 20 or 10 individuals that have diabetes as well, and then they meet for an hour. They talk to a nutritionist, physical therapist, XYZ, who are educating them on like how they can, you know, manage their symptoms and overcome these issues that they feel day to day. And the most beautiful part to it wasn't the education that they had with the provider and the person, like the person who deals with the diabetes. It was the interactions between the group, because they would be like, oh, that happens to me. I didn't know that other people felt like that, and they were able to make like build community, and you could tell like there was a difference in their, we did like lab results before and after, and there was a difference in their health status just from this community setting that they had for 2 months.
Yeah,
And
that
that
optimism
value,
changed. Yeah.
exactly, and that value comes from indigenous medicine.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Not feeling alone is really important. I really like what you said. It kind of like hit on the question that I was going to ask you, which was like, essentially, how has modern medicine today kind of repackaged traditional medicine? And we've kind of like touched on it in a way, but I feel like there's still a little bit more to say about how there's like Darwin and Levi Strauss, like an anthropologist, like how they interpreted these cultures, like basically like what was the bridge between people coming from other cultures to experience a culture, like them being invited to be in community and to like for that knowledge to be shared, and then that trust being manipulated and brought to their colleagues in different spaces and communicated in maybe a different way, and how that extraction process took place. Like what you imagine that was like?
Yeah, I think those ideas, those people were definitely a part of that. Like I even think of just colonization in general did that. You know, they came here, they explored, they kind of, you know, the indigenous people came with open arms, like, hey, nice to meet you. And then it's like, okay, we're gonna violently take all your things and learn the best, whatever you do, and then we'll just take it from you. And I think that culture started from there, and then people kind of just started to do the same in different parts of history. Even now, like there's even like modern wellness has that to it as well. Like you could think of like there's so many different types of yoga that are very commercialized, you know, and
right,
it
and
comes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No. I'm just saying like it comes from like an Ayurvedic practice that originates from India, but like it would be nice for that to stay the way that was practiced, like, and is practiced by the people who thought of this form of medicine. But now it's like we're gonna put hip hop, or we're gonna like make it into like this cool New York vibe thing instead of leaving it in the way that it was created.
That definitely brings us into a lot of different spaces for sure. Like I like to think that it didn't start from a malicious place.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's malicious how it's translated in modern times. It's just like a lack of consideration for others. And I don't even think that it's like on one culture or another. It's like an entity. It's like an energetic thing that comes from a desire for being seen. And I think that's also a value of community, is that it helps us to feel seen. It gives us purpose and accountability for others and how we impact others. And as you know, our world starts to trend towards individualism, that's why these things are continuing to prevail, because these seeds have been being cultivated from these times of when the medicines and the knowledge and the concepts have been extracted and repackaged to being somebody else's thing, when it really was like something that was to serve all of us in the first place. the possessiveness.
Yeah, yes. And maybe we're just not taught to, especially in the United States, we're a mix of so many different cultures. Like, it would be, like, I was never taught to acknowledge the land of the land in an indigenous sense of where I'm at. So, like, if I'm in Miami, like, who are the indigenous people that actually steward this land from the beginning? Like let's honor them before we do anything else. Like, but you know that culture is not there, and that stems into not just honoring the land that you're serving or where you're at, but also like the activities you do day to day that are influenced from other people. So like it's like the United States is cool because there's a mix of cultures, but we never really learned how to like acknowledge where things come from like in a very intentional way before doing things. I feel, at least for me. I don't know if you had a similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that like the United States is like the melting pot of all these cultures, but at the same time, it's like for some reason people feel like when they come to this place, they have to surrender that culture. They have to like dismantle what makes them unique and who they are. And I'm like, that's like the antithesis of what all of this I feel like was supposed to be.
Yes.
We're supposed to be really locked in. We're supposed to be very culturally competent, like very much the pinnacle of humanity. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about living lineages. Let's talk about what it means to be a part of a living tradition and what comes with that, what responsibilities come with that, and how we can continue to cultivate it.
For me, my brand is called Petra Aroma, and the name stems from my grandmother, Abuela Petra, and she is an ancestor of mine now, and someone that growing up I didn't have a lot of ability to see her often or even talk to her because she had Alzheimer's for many years and I was still young. So I would say I didn't have that connection to learn more about, and this I see as a way for me to connect with her in a deeper way because she really loved plant medicine. So I think one is honoring our ancestors in what we do day to day and what our life path is like telling us. I think that's so important. And in my case, like building a brand, I want it to be very ancestral led. I do have times where when I want to make a decision, a major decision, I do deep meditation or I pull out oracle deck and I ask questions and I try to connect with my abuela, but my other, all the way to my Taino ancestors to be like, is this the right way? Am I going the right direction? And I think that's so important in what we do. Always remembering our lineage because they're the ones that are guiding us ultimately. And you get so much from connecting with it. I think a lot of people forget that. And maybe they're scared to connect with their ancestral lineage because they think it's scary to connect with something that's not physically present. But once you open that, like it changes your world completely. And I would love to hear your experience with that too.
Totally agree. As far as like creating like a greater world, connecting in the physical, the spiritual, like just expanding your world and the community that you exist in outside of just the physical people or the physical environment. For me, it's definitely been a practice of reclamation. I know that the way that I was brought up, it never really was a thing of ancestry, but it was always a thing of like respecting your elders and just staying protected. And the means for protection was definitely like through prayer and through just like listening to your inner talk. But yeah, it was not in a way that felt like comprehensive to me. So when I began to explore more of a relationship with ancestry, that's when my worldview expanded, honestly. And when I realized that like the reason why we don't talk so much about ancestry is because it's been demonized in a way. It's been deemed just like dark, but I feel like it's the lightest thing that we can be is connected to those that have come before us and understanding that we are them and they are us, and those that come after us are us as well. And it creates more responsibility, honestly, to me, to just stay close to empowering my bloodline and to like do the work today so that the work that my ancestors did is not for naught, and the work that I do can be carried on into all those that I impact.
And yeah, and like it's not easy too. It's like means like opening up traumas in your life. Like at least for me, it was like opening up traumas or opening up, like learning what do I really deeply need to overcome that I have been struggling my whole life to reach my next level of like divinity or like closeness to spirit. But it's a beautiful journey, even though it's hard. It's not easy. It is beautiful.
It's an accountability practice.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's embedded in us though. It's genetic. And it's also like, it's memory. It's like a remembrance process. And I think that's also the function of these herbals and these like, medicinal ceremonies and really like just ritual as a whole in an indigenous context. It's about like creating spheres for remembering a why, remembering a how. Like just when we taste things, like for instance in like a ayahuasca journey, like that flavor of that brew, the process that is being cultivated to get you to the space to actually receive it, like all of that is unlocking things within us. And that's why it's not easy, because it requires a certain disposition.
And like I know you were talking about dark energy, like a lot of people associate connecting to ancestors that way. And I think it's important to know that there is a dark energy, like in spirituality, and people can call that, but then there's also like beautiful light energy. So it's the way that you practice, and as long as you have love in your heart and you call for divinity and like and God and positivity, that is what's gonna be given to you. But there are also ways to like call it negative things, and that it's important to be like conscious of what you're calling and how you do things, and being very intentional is really.
But it's so interesting. It's like the ones that are feeling fearful of the energy of spirituality are the ones that are cultivating the darkness.
Yes.
through unintentionality. There's the negative self-talk and all of the practices and the choices that are made that harbor those negative energies. So yeah, it is through the lightness that I think indigenous wisdom has done so well at like cultivating in us. I see indigenous wisdom as like the cornerstone of how spirituality is cultivated. All of our practices that help us to maintain close to our spirit, which is just like, our connection to experience, is derived from the rituals, the sense of community, the smells, the tastes, all of it. And there's so much gratitude that I want to offer to just all of the practices, all of these indigenous communities that just continue to give their stories, give their wisdom, even though they're constantly being disenfranchised.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I know it's a hard journey, and there are communities across the world that are fighting every day to preserve their land and their ideas and their medicine. So it's so important to acknowledge and, like you said, be grateful for all the work that they put in day to day for this.
It's not a possessive thing. It's not like they can only have their practices and their land and their this and their that. It's like, no, this is a trauma response. This is a trauma response. This is people
100%.
coming and trying to say like, okay, you guys have hurt us in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Like, we now need to shelter ourselves and to, isolate so that we can reestablish all that we are and all that we've always been, because we're constantly being told that we're not something that we know we are. So, yeah. Substitution versus sword. I also appreciate how you've been using the term modern medicine as opposed to Western medicine. Why do you choose to do that?
Yeah. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but the way so it's like for me it's like all encompassing. It's not just on the Western hemisphere that there's innovation in modern medicine. So that's why I choose to say it that way because I think it expands beyond Western. I know like that like maybe that was like the original area of how this came about, but like I think we're beyond that now it's like all encompassing.
Yeah, it's definitely like spread globally. I think the reason why the Western paradigm has even become like a thing is really it's like the approach to it, and that comes back around to kind of like the possessiveness. I think it's like being acknowledged. I think that's like the contrast between like a westernized perspective and I guess an indigenous perspective. Like indigeneity is all about like collectivism, everything is for all, like, you know, we all are impacting each other, interconnectedness, and then like westernized perspective is, you know, creating for self, the pursuit of knowledge. It pushes things forward in a certain way. I think about capitalism a lot and how I don't feel like it's an inherently bad thing, because it does push for innovation and keeps our world evolving.
Yeah.
And how like those two things, they seem very different, but they both are sourced from an idea around change. Like things are constantly changing, things are constantly being impacted. How are you impacting them? I don't know. There's something there that I don't necessarily know how to speak
I
to.
think you're doing a good job defining it. Yes. There's definitely a big difference there. So true. But like the other thing I don't like about Western is like, or maybe what is Western? Like the west side of the west of the world.
It's
like
ambiguous.
yeah, like what is that? And then it's like, okay, what if the West is the United States? I could be totally wrong, but let's say the West is the U.S. North America. There was like indigenous Native Americans there from different tribes, like Lenape, for example, and we're saying that Western means this negative thing. You know, I'm just like, I don't know. That's why I don't say it. But
I agree,
I
though.
could just, I think I need to know more about it though. I need to like look into why that language is used.
Yeah, I want to share this book with you that I have. It's
Okay.
literally called Westernized, or the Evolution of Western Science, and it goes through like all of the different eras of like scientific revolution, and just kind of like how this scientific theory was created and all these different things.
That's good.
But at the same time, it's really just one thing. Like it's really just knowledge. All of it, all of this is really just knowledge. But yes, let's get back to the plans. Let's get back to the plan. I'm going to move it into power, profit, and perception. So actually, before I go there, just clearly, we've been talking about centering origin communities. But why do you feel like it's important to center origin communities?
I think because it's important to acknowledge where knowledge comes from, but also because if we listen and practice and are like conscious of the way that we do things and we learn from where it's originated, like we get the best results of something. Just like, I know I said that in a very generic way, but it just like encompasses so much. I think that's like the major reason why I think it's super important. And also because I believe that what modern or Western medicine looks like and what it's missing is that spirituality, connection, and community. So that's why I think it's so important for us to acknowledge and really deeply try to practice indigenous medicine.
What do you think happens when knowledge is divorced from its cultural context?
I think it like kind of what you were saying about the definition of the Western culture. It's like isolation, depression, a lot of mental illness. not understanding why we're here, like what is our purpose in life, not being able to experience what life is really about too. Because there's people, like, unfortunately, day to day that like do the same thing for 60 years of their life and then retire, and then they only have like 20 years to experience life day to day without, a routine of going working for someone else, So
Yeah.
I think that's why it's so important to get ourselves out of that mindset, that to be confident that we could get out of that if we wanted to. But also noting that we could utilize those experiences to use as like a jumping point for us to get to being able to pursue our passions, It's just like we did. We went to school for many years. I was in corporate for a couple of years. I learned from these things and like financially was able to save up to now start my entrepreneur and like my life path journey.
That brings us into a really important place, which is about like revolution. The world is changing for the better, and sometimes it seems like for other things as well. We are impacting the world by making choices on like a personal level, community level, and then it just expands from there. So I think that's a really important piece about like how when we are really operating from like our knowing, that we get to a better place for everybody. Like when we operate from like, this is what I truly know, this is what I truly feel, and like taking that risk, it's like it creates space for other people to take risk as well. What do you think about, it's really like these colonial and capitalistic systems that make us feel like we have to work for 50 years, like you're saying, and only get 20 years to actually pursue passion or community or, care? How do you feel like colonial and capitalistic systems profit off of herbal traditions while silencing their keepers?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like we were talking about with like, it started so long ago, and maybe I think it's to the point where it's not even directly, like it's happening in such a distanced way that like people aren't even conscious that it comes from plant medicine, like, or like even like the idea of spirituality, because it's like now a lot of using like antibodies, extracting different cells from our bodies and manipulating them a certain way and then putting them back into our bodies, stem cell therapy, like it's like so actually distant from herbal medicine that like people don't even think to like acknowledge that medicine in general is rooted from that space. I think that's the issue. It's like it's so distant now that people don't even see it as like the basis of it.
That makes a lot of sense, because like medicine is constantly evolving. There was definitely a time when it was all about like the ethnobotanical quest and going places and bringing things back and synthesizing them, but now like we're evolving into a space of like you said, like more cellular manipulation and all of these different things, which is quite interesting to think about. I also want to talk about like representation in these spaces, because even though there are a lot of fundamental concepts that are still being benefited from in the pharmaceutical industry, I think that the evidence based psychology always comes from a space of like having to have gone through certain prerequisites or having to done it in a very specific way. What do you think, like, for your journey and the impact that you want to leave on the world, how do you like go about having credit or like being qualified in a world that tells you you need certain things in order for your statements to be valid?
I fight with that's like something I think about a lot, and like I fight with like identity crises and things like that, especially being part of the diaspora. Like I grew up in the United States and now I'm back in the island and a Borican, and I think like I know I didn't grow up like the people here. I need to acknowledge that. And I also don't speak perfect Spanish. Like, yeah, it's something that I battle every day. It's like, is it okay for me to share about Caribbean medicine if I didn't like live here my whole life? Or like, is it okay for me to say it in Spanish? I mean, in English, when like, people here speak Spanish, like, and actually I'm trying more and more to speak more Spanish when I talk about it's here, because I think because I want people from the island to connect with it, even though both English and Spanish are colonizer languages, which is the funny part.
Right.
But yes, I deal with that a lot. I just like think it's important to acknowledge the differences, and be like, I don't ever want to think that like that I know how it is to live on an island my whole life, because I don't. I know there's so many, like I have yet to experience a hurricane while living here, and I know that that's a very traumatic experience. There's just so much to learn from, especially from like where we're from. I think it's a very complicated thing. But I feel like what brings me back is just like following my ancestors and my guides, and trusting that since I'm doing these things and I'm getting a lot of positive signs and alignment from community and from my ancestors, that I'm doing the right thing. Going back to feel like inward and be like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm happy, and people are resonating, and my ancestors are happy, type thing.
Yeah, and it's all valid. Like, we don't have to necessarily derive in the experience of it to have like compassion and understanding for it and know our role within revolutionizing the space. It's more so about that calling, about the truth, living in truth, because no one can tell you like to stop. And I think that's something that is so interesting, because like in Western or modern medicine, there's this idea of like who can do what and when, but at the same time there's like extracting and like a taking that is happening at the same time, of like, just taking knowledge that was gifted and repurposing it and changing it into something else to create a perception.
Yeah.
So like perception versus truth, people that are like living in that experience of it, like you, like me, like Indigenous people across the world, just living in their truth, living in their expression, basically coming up with all of these beautiful, brilliant things based on that expression. That's where true knowledge exists. It doesn't come from a clinical trial, it doesn't come from a paper, it doesn't come from 4 years in school, it doesn't come from any of those places. It comes from truly in your heart of heart knowing that like this is my research, my life is my research, like everything that I'm saying is a part of my feeling, my felt experience, and that's my proof, and that's proof enough.
It's so true, because some people like don't do things because they feel like they need to get a degree, like a doctorate doesn't mean anything in herbal medicine. Like, I mean, I feel like for me, the abuelas that have in the mountains that have been working with plant medicine their whole life and have had visions even as a 5-year-old, those are the people that have the most wisdom about plant medicine, not the people who have studied 6 years or 8 years getting a doctorate program, in my opinion. I know there's a lot, there's a big debate on that. But that's why I always seek to learn as much as I can from my community, because I know that I have so much more to learn. And it's all, life is about learning too.
We all play a role, Daniella, and your role is just as important, honestly. You being that bridge in the diaspora of the Puerto Rican people, like, we need you. We need you in spaces like this, representing your lived experience and your reclamation process, because it gives people permission to do it in their own way. It gives us the insight that we yearn for, the connection that we need, and it just makes us more whole. It makes us more whole. So thank you so much for just representing that part of yourself.
You're saying that. I really appreciate that. It made my day.
This has been amazing. There's still so much to unpack. There's so much that I would just love to just talk to you about. And I could keep you here,
part two.
But just, this has been great. This is our first podcast. I've learned so much about you, about just how I truly feel about this whole idea of the root of medicine. And I hope others have learned something as well.
Yes, and thank you for holding the space for this. I'm so excited to see like who else you speak to throughout this journey of yours with this podcast, and like I loved learning from you. I loved everything you said as well, and I'm so happy that there's people all across the world that have the same like idea and alignment of pursuing our paths and like sharing the knowledge, like making these spaces and like putting them out there on social media and wherever else, so we can maybe like plant a little seed in people's heads to like gravitate towards what their life purpose is, and to feel the difference of life when you go towards like indigeneity and the values that come with that.